the technical aspects of writing a screenplay are really important. When I get a screenplay now, I never would have done this when I was living in LA, because I was trying to get my stuff read. I'd read things about what agents did, or producers did, and I'd think, that's wrong, they should just read it. But they're absolutely right. When I pick up a screenplay, the first thing I do when someone sends it to me is I look at the cover. Okay, bad cover. I wouldn't, that's one mistake right there. You don't do big graphics on your cover. It's just a very simple title page. And then I go to the last page, 107 pages. Then I go through it. How much white space is there? Are there big blocks of dialogue or big blocks of scenes? No? All right. Okay, I'll read the first 10 pages. If I'm captured after the first 10, now if I'm doing notes for somebody, I'll read it all the way through. But I want to see if I can get captured in the first 10 pages. What they do in LA is in Hollywood they call it a 10-30. They read the first 10 and the last 30. If they're grabbed at the first 10, they'll read the ending. If they like the ending, they'll maybe go back and read the whole thing. Now you have to remember that the people doing this are people who are paid to read scripts. So they'll take 20 scripts home on a weekend, and they make so much money per script. So you can't read all 20 scripts, or you're not going to make any money. So there has to be a shortcut. So they can tell generally in the first 10 pages if you've got what it takes to be a screenwriter, if your story has any interest. So the other thing is, because we live in an MTV world, you've got to grab people right off the bat. There's got to be something big happening right away. Unless it's something like Lost in Translation, or more of a character study kind of thing, or a film that sort of meanders along. And I think as a first-time screenwriter, you can't do that, because you're not going to get past the person, the gatekeeper, who's going to either accept your script and pass it along to somebody, or pass on it, put it in the garbage heap. So then as I read through it, I look to see how well the characters are developed. And I'm sure, again, you guys do this in all your writing. You folks do this in all your writing. You want to write different character voices. If all your characters sound the same, there's nothing to distinguish one from another. It's interchangeable language. You're really not doing your job with your character development. So when I write, what I do is I'll do a biography of my characters. I'll figure out what each character, who they are, where they're from, what their background is. I'll do a history that never shows up. It's backstory. But it helps my characters be distinct. If you would go to Los Angeles, say you wanted to write for, I don't even know what's on anymore. If you wanted to write for Seinfeld or Frasier, you would watch Frasier as much as you can to learn how the characters speak, learn their voice, and then you try to write to their voice. That's one good way of getting started in Hollywood, is writing a spec script for a program, for a TV program that already exists. Now, as I start to read it, I'm looking for distinction in characters. I'm looking for how well a scene is, how well your scene descriptions are done. I'm jumping ahead. Let me give you one more technical thing before I look at those things. I look at, do you understand the format of screenplay writing? If your screenplay is not in 12-point Courier type, I'm not going to read it. If your character slugs are not properly positioned in the center of the page, I'm not going to read it. If all your character slugs are like a play off to the side, and your dialogue runs from right to left underneath it, I'm not going to read it. And not because it's not a good screenplay, but because you haven't done your homework. If you're going to attack this form of writing, you have to learn everything there is to know about it. There are tons of books that will teach you about screenplay format. And screenplay format varies. It varies from sitcom to episodic television to screenplay. They're all a little different. So whatever you're going to go after, you've got to figure out what the proper format is. For a long time, when you would write screenplays, you get to the end of a scene and you would say, cut. You put a little cut to over here on the right-hand side of the page. And then you go to your next scene. Well, people in Hollywood don't like to read. And if you have 300 scenes in your movie, that means you have 600 words that they don't need to read. They don't need to read cut to every time the scene ends. So what eventually happens is all those things kind of drop off. So you have to keep current with what the current screenplay format is. Changes every year. You don't do cut tos anymore. You used to do at the bottom, if the scene continued on the next page, you write CONT period on the bottom of the page. So the reader knew, oh, the scene continues. Well, as I'm reading the scene, I know that it continues because there's not a new scene slug on the next page. So that's another 300, let's see, if your screenplay is 120 pages long, it's another 120 words. Now we've knocked out 720 words that I don't have to read as a reader. So you have to understand the format. If you pick up an old format guide and you write your screenplay with old format, a reader's not going to read it. They're looking for any reason not to read your screenplay. As weird as that sounds, that's what they're looking for. They want to get through the stuff. Now, if everything passes muster, you've done your work, you've picked up final draft, or what I did, I made my own macros, and I couldn't afford final draft, so I made my own. But I studied screenplays like crazy. I picked up all the books about screenplay format, and I've written it in the right form. If everything technically is working, then I start to read it. How quickly am I grabbed? Are the characters distinct and different? Are the scene descriptions long enough to let me know what's going on, but not too long? I don't want to spend a lot of time reading. If I'm reading a scene description, and if you look through this script, there may be a couple that are longer, but most of my scene descriptions are no longer than 3 or 4 lines. If it's going to be longer than that, I'll break it and I'll start another paragraph. I don't want to see a scene description that goes that long on the page, because what it ends up being is a block of type like that. It's an awful lot for me to read. I want to read down the screenplay. Okay? What I mean by that is you want your eye to be constantly moving down the page and on to the next page. So, say you're writing an action sequence, and you say, okay, so Bob drives out of his garage. He shifts into the second gear. He shoots down the road. He makes a wild right-hand turn. You could put that all one sentence after another in a paragraph, and it's not very exciting. But if it's an exciting scene, you want to move people along, you would go, Bob drives out of his garage, new line. He shoots down the road, new line. He shifts into second. So you want to move people along. If the scene is an action scene that needs to move, you want to move people's eye down the page. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. It would just say interior Trinity House dash common area day. That's called a scene slug. And what you're doing is you're basically telling where this situation is taking place. They can take place interior, exterior, day, or night. Okay? So what you do is you start very wide and you write down. So you start with, we're outside, or in this case we're inside, we're in the house. Where are we? We're in Trinity House, we're in the common area, and it's during the day. So we write from general to more specific. Okay? Now, if the next scene were to be Trinity House cafeteria, okay? If I'm staying in the same general location, but I'm just changing rooms, I don't reslug it as interior Trinity House cafeteria day. I would just slug it as cafeteria. That way, again, you're trying to get rid of words. You don't want people to have to read a whole lot, but you want to let them know that you've changed location, you've changed room in a single location. Now, in the middle there, we have what are called character slugs. Character slugs are the character's name. It's what the character is going to be saying. I don't know if in here there are any... Look on page 52, halfway down. Marnie is talking, it says Marnie into phone. That's a parenthetical. You put that in there, and that just tells if the character's talking into the telephone, or if they're saying something angrily. Boy.
Speaking of phone.
I guess. Yeah. Get out now. He's got 20 minutes to go. So those are, and now as a writer, as a novel writer, you might explain that a character is angry or upset, or how they deliver a line. You're gonna try to let your reader know, because they're not gonna look at a movie. They're reading your book. You need to let them know everything that's going on by reading your novel. As a screenwriter, you're going to give a lot up to the actors. You're going to let the actors determine a lot of what is happening. So you don't want to give a lot of direction. Angry, he said angrily. Don't put that in there. It's not important to tell that the character is angry. If the actors are good, they're going to know that the character is angry, or they're going to maybe have a different take on it.